Today on Aging Untold, your parent or loved one might suffer from an often hidden pain.
And if you know where to look and you know what to look for, you can prevent these.
What you need to know about pressure sores to protect those at risk. Plus, get ahead of the caregiving crisis before it hits home.
That's what I've heard over the years. How do I start? When do I start? I think you start way early.
We'll help you create your checklist now so you can have what you need later. Then later, what started as a hobby became a fight for equality.
It seemed like all our bowling alleys were going to fold up and we wanted somewhere to go.
How two friends knocked down pins and racial barriers at the local lanes and created a legacy that's still inspiring change. Experts with advice and solutions. You're watching Aging Untold with Aging Well Coach Catherine Ambrose, gerontologist Sam Craddock, aging expert Amy O'Rourke, and board-certified physician Dr. Ray Rogers. We're all getting older. It's about time we talked about it.
Welcome to Aging Untold. Today we're talking about a painful but preventable health condition that impacts more than 2 million people each year, pressure sores, also known as bed sores. We want to warn you, some of the upcoming images and conversation may be a little graphic, but it's an important topic to tackle. Dr. Ray, can you start by explaining what pressure sores are and how they develop?
Well, they develop when prolonged pressure cuts off blood flow to the skin. Any organ where you have no blood flow eventually will die. So there's different stages of these bed sores or pressure sores. So there's about 4 stages, really 5 when you can't describe it anymore. But the first stage is the skin is intact, and it's what we call the skin doesn't blanch. So, when you push into your skin and it turns white, it's because the blood flow capillaries are intact. So you stop that blood flow. When you let go, the color comes back. So it just goes downhill from there. So the second stage is the skin is not intact anymore, but it's like a superficial blister. And then the third one is more full thickness. Now you can see fat. And then on the 4th stage, you're seeing bone and ligaments and tendons and all that. But what's really important that if you really inspect the skin, keep it clean and intact and all that, to look for those. And then knowing where the pressure sores are, but look at the skin, and one of the earliest signs is when it doesn't blanch. That's an early sign that you have some compromise going on already.
And a pressure sore doesn't happen in a day, but prevention certainly does. And if you know where to look and you know what to look for, you can prevent these. And I tell people, up until the exception for me has always been end of life. When you're in that final stage, in that transitional stage, we can't prevent.
Sure.
But up until then, these are preventable. You should never have somebody that has a bed sore, but you got to know where to look.
Right.
So shoulders, hips, coccyx, which is right above your tailbone, heels.
Yeah.
I have seen heel sores that have gone septic, and we have lost people over just a tiny sore where a shoe's rubbing because they're not wearing good socks.
Right.
And so knowing what to look for and where to look for it, and then how to prevent them is paramount. And too many people don't know.
I know. One site I love is Medicare.gov, and it has a whole list of supplies and equipment that you can use if you do get a bed sore, but you can also find tips to prevent. Something so simple, get pressure off the area 2 hours at a time. If you've got the arm strength, lift yourself up. If you've got pressure on your bottom, go ahead and get up and move around. And one little tip, it's kind of off what you said, was if you're wondering, is this a pressure sore? You're out there like, am I gonna recognize it? If there's a little like color red,
Push on it.
Push on it, that's right. And then also you can lift your heel up, and if that color is the same color, it doesn't change, whether you're Caucasian, it's like red. If you're brown, it's purple. And then if it stays that way in 30 minutes, get it checked right away.
Right. And I think if you understand, like you said, where to look and all that, those bony prominences, if you know.
Right. Well, if we sit here like this the whole
For
time
long enough,
and we're doing this show, at the end of the show, the elbow's going to be red. That's actually the beginning stages of what could turn into a pressure sore.
Yeah.
And so you've got to watch for that.
It's so interesting when you're at home, if you wash yourself, pat yourself dry instead of rubbing. You know, when your skin is older, it's thin.
Yeah,
Right.
very thin,
And
yeah.
use a lot of moisturizer, lots and lots of moisturizer. If you're in bed and you're sleeping on a wrinkled clothing, wrinkled sheets,
Exactly.
get them flattened out.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I'm learning so much. Well, but the topic of bed sores, my family learned this the hard way. Just awful, horrific. My dad, because of his weight and his condition, when he had emergency transport, he was pulled out on a tarp, and he got a horrific shearing wound that we did not know about, and the hospital hid it from my family for days upon days. Every time staff was going to do something for my dad, they would ask the family members to leave the room. And this is way before I got into the aging space, and we didn't know any better. So we just complied. We did what was ordered. We went out in the hallway and we waited like, good, compliant people. And then we'd come in when they would let us in. Well, one day my mother and my brother walked in just a little too soon, and they got a glimpse of this horrible wound. And what I learned from that experience is that modesty is out the window, just like childbirth. Forget it. If your family's in the hospital, you're going to see some private parts because you've got to watch what's going on, and you want to stay present, observe, and ask questions. Be the advocate that your loved one needs. When they're vulnerable, like in the hospital, they need to be watched.
And let's not forget, we tend to talk about pressure sores, and we're talking about bedridden people. Don't forget about the people in wheelchairs. See, people forget about people in wheelchairs. They're still sitting. They still have to be repositioned and all that as well.
That's exactly right.
And then the other part to that, yes, pressure sores because of lack of blood flow, which is cutting off oxygen and nutrients, but also their status of them and nutritional status. Different things, they help that skin to be able to repair. They probably have, some vascular diseases already, but what about things like vitamin C and zinc and things that you can help them to really repair?
And up your protein intake.
Your protein intake.
You have to up your protein.
Get on Medicare B, get that stage 3 and 4. If you're home, you can get homebound wound care and get that healed faster.
Right.
All right, very good. I know this has to be helpful for viewers, and sometimes it's families that are the first line of defense. We'll be right back on Aging Untold.
Coming up, we're breaking down the gluten-free debate on whether it's a necessity or just a fad. Plus, we'll examine a rare disease that may leave you with no choice but to pass on that pasta or bread. But first, you or your parents are fine now, but what about tomorrow?
When you're tiny and weak and vulnerable in a hospital bed, that is the worst time to be giving people instructions.
We'll show you how a pre-game plan can save your family from crisis and preserve dignity when caregiving needs arise.
Welcome back to Aging Untold. When it comes to sports, a good coach will develop a pre-game plan to get the win. That's a strategy that can also carry over into our personal lives when it comes to caregiving. Sam, why do you think it's important for people at any age to have a plan in place?
Oh, because the crisis isn't the fall. It's that unprepared scramble that goes on. And so pre-game planning is always love. But panic is super expensive. When you have someone that's had a fall and you don't have a plan, or they have a hospital event and you don't know what's going to happen next, then you're calling up an agency and you're spending the big bucks to get 24-hour support in because you didn't have your ducks in a row, basically. And so this is just basic caregiving right here. And it's honestly, for our aged community, it's remaining in control.
Sure.
Everybody's so afraid of giving up control and not having a say-so. Well, if you pre-game plan, it's your plan that we're going to implement. So talk about it early.
We used to be, everybody used to kind of put their head in the sand, didn't want to think about negative things and things like that, but we are living longer.
Yeah, we
and everybody's acknowledging it. So it's time to just start kind of talking about things in advance, because when you're in that fight or flight state and everything is happening, your memory is gone. So you're making decisions, you're spending more money because you're just at the whim.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think they feel paralyzed because they haven't started that first conversation. That's what I've heard over the years. How do I start? When do I start? I think you start way early and just open your mouth and say, what is your vision for your future? If something goes wrong with you, you get a medical diagnosis, how do you think you want? Do you want to be at home? Do you want to move into a community? What kind of therapy do you want to get? Get that conversation started early, and then make it a regular, structured conversation. And then in that talk, ask them, what does your money look like? Can you afford the things that you want to do in your older age?
Right.
You could always say, hey, I was watching that show, Aging Untold,
Yeah.
that I told you about, and they were talking about this. That's a perfect conversation starters, because families are always going to do better when they talk before the crisis rather than in the middle of it. You're getting everybody on the same page so that these decisions aren't forced at the last minute. And when people have an opportunity to be a part of the conversation, they're going to be more comfortable with the decisions that are made too.
Yeah.
People need time to process, and they don't have time to do that in an emergency.
Well, you have the 5 Ps. It is, who are the people? Who are the people? Who's going to run point? Where's the paper? We've got to have paperwork in place. Healthcare proxies are numero uno right now. Where's the pills? What med list are you on, and who's taking what, when, where, and how? And then what place? Where do you want to be? Do you want to go here? Do you want to go there? Do you know what rehab you might want to go to? What hospital? And who's paying your bills while you're out of the house?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to come home to the electric being shut off.
Right.
Or the garbage piled up.
And don't forget to update.
And update
And
it all
don't
the
forget
time.
to update.
Right.
And then do your research. What's around? What kind of caregiving agencies are out there? What kind of assisted living's out there? What do the rehabs look like? Do you want in-hospital rehab, or do you want skilled nursing rehab? These are really good things so that in a panic, you kind of know what direction you're going to go in.
Caregiving conversations are best when they don't start in the emergency room.
Amen.
When you're tiny and weak and vulnerable in a hospital bed, that is the worst time to be giving people instructions. So do it in advance.
Coming up, you'll meet a pair of courageous athletes and learn how their talent and tenacity decades ago made them great bowlers and even better advocates. But first, gluten-free is part of a billion-dollar industry. We'll explain why so many people are ditching wheat and why some doctors say gluten-free may not always be the healthier option. You can watch Aging Untold anytime online. Go to aginguntold.com or subscribe to the Aging Untold YouTube channel for more.
The next time you shop for groceries, check out the gluten-free section. A surge in the number of products on the shelves reflects the popularity of the diet. But is cutting out gluten healthy if you don't need a medical reason to do so? In this medical mythbuster, Viv Williams gets answers from an expert at Duke University.
Gluten is a protein found in grains, such as wheat, barley, and rye. Many food products contain it: bread, pasta, baked goods, and cereal.
We definitely see a lot of patients in our center who are trying to eat gluten-free, and a lot of them don't know if they really need to.
Dr. William Yancey, a Duke University internist, says most people can eat and digest gluten without issue, but
People with a particular disease called celiac disease have antibodies that actually attack it like it's a foreign substance.
Yancey says this causes inflammation throughout your body and in your small intestine. Symptoms of celiac disease include bloating, diarrhea, constipation, fatigue, malnutrition, osteoporosis or bone loss, and in very rare cases, cancer. Dr. Yancey says a blood test can diagnose celiac disease, and people who have it should not eat gluten.
But that's about 1% of the population.
If celiac disease is that rare, why, according to the research cited by the Gluten Intolerance Group, are 23% of consumers buying gluten-free products? Yancey says there are many reasons, but first, let's look at the economics of it. The gluten-free industry is big business. A Vantage market research analysis valued the gluten-free product market at more than $6.3 billion, and it's expected to reach $11 billion by 2030. Yancey says some people may reach for gluten-free products because they heard on social media or from a friend that it's a healthy thing to do. Others say they feel better and sleep better when they don't eat gluten. Yancey says non-celiac gluten sensitivity, or NCGS, may cause similar symptoms to celiac disease, but they're milder often. He notes that researchers are trying to figure out if gluten is causing symptoms in people with NCGS or if there's something else in gluten-containing products causing the issue. Yancey says if cutting out gluten makes you feel better, go ahead and do it. But make sure the replacement foods you choose contain the nutrients you need.
Well, if you're eating foods that have gluten in them and they're high in nutrition, they're whole grain foods, then and you substitute gluten-free products that aren't full of those nutrients, then it would be a problem.
So, if you've been diagnosed with celiac disease, don't eat gluten. Otherwise, Yancey says there's no harm in cutting it out, as long as you're still eating a well-balanced diet. With this medical mythbuster, I'm Viv Williams.
Well, I think this gluten thing is kind of one of the big nutrition phases that people go through, and it's not man-made. I mean, it is man-made. So you may not have celiacs per se and have that gene, and if you do, all your first-degree relatives need to check, but it doesn't mean it's expressed. But you know, there are 62 different proteins in wheat, and gluten is only one of them. So a lot of times when people are having inflammatory responses or the bloating, or even brain fog and all that, it may be one of the other components and not necessarily gluten.
But as you know, as my doctor, I do have issues with it. I do have the antibodies and the inflammation that I experienced when I was eating gluten. And I don't think anybody chooses to go gluten-free because it tastes good. And you have to really watch, because a lot of gluten-free products are really high in sugar.
And
really
starch and
high.
everything
Oh,
else.
if I had anything to say, it would be read labels. Read. I look at a label and I don't eat flour or sugar, so I'm way extreme, make a lot of people mad. But I read the labels, and if sugar is like fifth and down, I do it. But often it's the second ingredient. So how healthy is it really?
Up next, striking down segregation. Meet the men who fought for civil rights in an unexpected arena.
The Supreme Court's landmark Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954 was a catalyst for change. It sparked the desegregation of public spaces across the country during that time. Black residents in New Orleans fought for equal access, even in bowling alleys. Reporter Tisha Powell introduces us to two men united by their love of bowling, whose courage inspired generational change.
That ball is 50 years old.
At 80 and 83,
Look at Alden.
Alden McDonald and Walter Woody Woodruff
Oh, wow.
had not only witnessed history, but have worked to change it.
You've been practicing on me.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed discrimination in public spaces, voting, employment, and education. In many cases, whites in the South resisted integration with protest and violence. Among those public spaces were restaurants, movie theaters, and bowling alleys, a place both McDonald and Woodruff held dear. Woodruff bowled his first game in 1961 at the all-black Delta bowling lanes in the Desire housing development and was hooked.
It was so much fun, and my whole family enjoyed it a lot.
I bowled so much, my thumb used to swell up.
McDonald, Woodruff, and others would eventually form the New Orleans Travelers Bowling League.
So they would go to bowling alleys in states where bowling alleys were integrated, but they would only get to bowl on certain lanes.
But back home, the few black bowling alleys couldn't seem to hang on.
It seemed like all our bowling alleys were going to fold up, and we wanted somewhere to go.
That meant integrating local facilities, a feat that would prove difficult and dangerous.
We were kind of young and foolish back then, and so we began challenging things.
They had the state police outside with canine dogs at the door, and we go, wow, I don't know if we should go in here or not. And Edna said, look, we're just gonna go right on in. So we went in and we asked for a lane and they refused us.
Were you afraid of being arrested?
Yeah, I was kind of afraid,
And all of this just to get to bowl.
just to get the bowl.
As it turns out, a visit by black bowlers to a whites-only bowling alley piqued the interest of the FBI. Woodruff said agents paid him a visit at work. Woodruff and McDonnell never stopped challenging the status quo, efforts that would eventually lead to equality as more businesses opened their doors to all. Lisa Woodruff White says her dad is nothing short of an American hero.
The bravery he showed in being willing to take action to help integrate the bowling alleys was really significant for me.
Very proud of the things that we've done in making things better for the future and for future generations.
Great story. It takes passionate and committed people to make things happen. So they were bold and they got it done.
I think about them wanting to play and then having the foresight to make it happen. And then I think of that daughter, and I wanted to ask, what is she doing now? And, you know, I wonder what, because what that implanted in her is such a legacy of what's important, where to keep your focus. They wanted to play, they made it happen. So to give that to your family, the generations, not just generations now, and, you know, of course there needs to be more change, et cetera, but in his own family.
But the other thing too is, look at, he started that movement early and he's still moving in this older age, so the brain is, and the coordination and all that, so.
And one of them was a southpaw. He was throwing left-handed.
You see a spin?
Yeah, I was impressed. I like to bowl, so I was watching that as well.
We're all getting older, and it's about time we talked about it. Until next time on Aging Untold.
On the next Aging Untold, if you're struggling with how to care for a loved one from afar, we'll give you some insight on how to manage their needs and ease your fears.